For those of you who wish to do things by the book, here's a schematic. Otherwise, I'm going to show you. Alright, here's what you're going to need, kind of in this order. A breaker bar that's going to hold a 22 millimeter socket, socket wrench. These are all 12 millimeter wrenches of various types. You're going to need a 14, a 17. You're going to need tire clamps, about 3 of them for the motorcycle to make it drop center. You're going to need 2 Nomar prying bars. You're going to need one of these bars. I don't know what those are called. You're going to need also a stem remover, valve stem remover. And continuing on, you're going to need a bungee cord to hold your brake caliper out of the way. You're going to need a smaller bungee cord to hold your swing arm, rim protector, some various pieces of wood, a pry for your brake pads, and then some torque wrenches. I got a small inch-pounds one and a larger foot-pounds one, and most importantly, one of those. Then a motorcycle jack with 3 wood shims. Wood shims go on all other 3 points of the jack except this front left corner. And you're going to need some form of tire changer. I recommend the Nomar because it has an awesome bead breaker on it, and a tire balancer. If it's a hot sunny day, let your tire be baking in the sun to warm it up. Secondly, here's our Yamaha V-Star. Jack it up. The center point is going to be on this bolt right here behind the kickstand. Alright, first thing we're going to want to do is with a 14 millimeter unscrew this bolt on top of your brake caliper, and also with a 12 millimeter unscrew these 2 bolts down here of your brake caliper and remove all those. Okay, a word to the wise. After you got those bolts out, what I do is wiggle off my brake caliper from the disc here. But when you do, it's going to want to just flop and wedge itself down here below your tire and frame. So what I do is I put a bungee cord on it and just strap it up over the bike so that it's out of your way. And plus you'll need it up high when you reinstall your tire, because if this is below your frame, you're going to have to pull the whole drive shaft out again and redo it. Now on the left side of your bike, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts that need to be removed. For that you can use your socket wrench with a 14 millimeter for all 4 bolts and remove those. Next, using a breaker bar with a 22 millimeter socket on it, put it on your axle bolt on the left hand side of the bike and loosen that up. So now back on the right hand side of the bike, we need to remove this nut and this whole bracket right here. So grab yourself a 12 millimeter socket and do that. So this is what you should have after you remove that. So you should be able to just pull straight back and watch the drive shaft come right out of the bike like that. Careful not to let it hit the ground and break. And you may have to jack your bike up to get your wheel out from under your fender, which I'm going to have to do. Okay, so here's our right hand side of the bike, our left hand side. Go ahead and pull your axle out. Keep all your brake caliper hardware, your washer and everything intact. Alright, there's our wheel and drive shaft. Now let me show you something. With our drive shaft, there's a little doohickey in here. You're going to want to take that out. It's just a spacer that goes inside here, so don't lose that. And secondly, the drive shaft has gear oil in it, final drive gear oil. And I found out if you lay it down or any other way, it leaks. So I've learned to keep the thing straight up, so I use a crate like this, just so I keep the oil level. I highly recommend laying out your nuts, bolts, washers as I have, so you don't get things mixed up or washers on the wrong side of the frame. Of course, here's our axle bolt and its assembly. our nut assembly on the right hand side of the bike, our upper and lower frame bolts, and these are our brake caliper bolts, our doohickey, our spacer. And these are the tools I used on the right hand side of the bike. These are the tools I used on the left hand side. So everything's organized. Get yourself a valve stem remover and hopefully a tire changer. And we're going to get rid of our air and break the bead on our tire. You should get something like this out of it. Now we're going to break the bead on our tire. You want to hear that sound of it ripping away right there. I'm going to rotate a little bit. And for those of you happening to use a no-mar tire changer for future reference, to fit a back tire of a V-Star, count in 1, 2, 3, 4 holes on the back, 1, 2, 3, 4 holes on the swing arm, and 3 holes on the sticker arm. And now with rotor side up, valve stem in about the 7 o'clock position, go ahead and position all these clamps right over the swing arms that are underneath them. And then we're going to have to flip over the tire. Okay, tire is flipped over now, rotor side is down. I positioned the tire, I jogged it about 1/10 to put the valve stem directly at the 6 o'clock position. Reason for the clamps is it allows the tire changer to grab the rim underneath, and then we simply lock it in place and remove our clamps. So before we take our old tire off, you can see this is the direction it's supposed to go. I took a piece of tape, put it on the rim, so when I put the new tire on, I can align it easily, and I recommend putting a piece of tape on the other side too. Alright, with our tire fastened down between about 7 and 4, we're going to give the tire a little bit of lube there. And we're going to take our demounters. Notice how it's flat on one side and bumpy on the other. We're going to jam this down in our tire. Once it's jammed down, you turn it, you rotate it, so that you can grab the lip of your tire, kind of bring it up like so. And we're going to drop our center post. And using leverage, we're going to pull that rim off of our tire. Alright, and it's at this time now you want to remove your tube before you take the other side of the tire off. Now you want to use a 12 millimeters. This is kind of one of those ratchet sockets, but you want to remove your tube nut that holds the valve stem in place. Then we're going to pull our tube out. And now, with the tube out, we're going to bring the second side of this tire up so that I can catch the other side of the tire over the rim. Drop our center post, and we'll peel that one off too. Voila. And now is a perfect time to clean up some gunk and oil in this tire if you wish. Okay, 3 things important. We just grabbed our tire out of the sun. It's nice and expanded. Number 1, make sure our arrow is going the same position as our arrow on our rim. That's important. Number 2, make sure our valve stem is down at the 6 o'clock position. I'm going to have to show you how we install it, which is important. And then number 3, make sure your yellow dot is lined up over your hole when you put the tire on. So it's going to go over like this. Straight yellow dot, valve stem. So with everything lined up, we're going to grab some tire paste, jelly stuff, and put it on between 10 and 2 on our rim. We're going to grab our tire and again put it on between 10 and 2 on the outside that we're going to push down on. Now if you are having troubles mounting your tire by slipping it on, what I found is you get 2 pry bars here. These are Nomar pry bars. And just get a pinch in on each side. Bring them apart and it'll force that wheel in a drop center. Alright, now take your tube. Remember, valve stem down at the 6 o'clock position. And we want the valve stem facing up towards our drive shaft side so it's easy to fill later on. Won't be messing with the rotor in the way. But just now, with your tire half on, thread in your tube, trying not to twist it. The 90% of our tube underneath the rim now, and this part's sticking out. I'm just going to give it a quick shot of air. There's still no valve stem in here, just to make sure that we got all our twists out and there's no binding happening. I discovered take some 1x2 blocks of wood and simply stuff them in underneath the tire, like so. And that will give you enough working room for the top part of your hand. And let me show you what to do on the bottom. So here's what you do. You grab the bottom of your tire, put a rim protector on first, and get one of these, I don't know what you call these things, crowbars. We're going to pull our tire out enough to get this crowbar in there. Now what you want, the trick is getting this crowbar so that you can pull your tire on the outside of your rim. Once we got it, okay, I'm going to take a bungee cord and tie it off at the bottom here so that it doesn't release. So now all together, here's what the top portion of your tire looks like. Lots of working space. And the bottom portion of your tire. Now we can get our valve stem started in our tire. And once you got it through, go ahead and put your locking nut back on that stem so it don't fall out. Alright, locking nut is on. Still no valve stem, but I'm going to give another shot of air just to get any kinks out. And I think we're good. We're ready to put the rest of the tire together. Now the folks at Nomar, which is where this tire changer comes from, recommend this installing tool where you're supposed to, put the tire in a drop center and then stuff this end in one end and then pivot it around. It's supposed to squeeze your tire inside that rim. The V-Star's rim is so shallow, it doesn't have a drop center to even worry about per se. So this tool is useless, and Nomar can challenge that. They can come over here and show me, because I don't think they could even do it. But there are other instruments here. These Nomar pry bars are excellent for getting a V-Star tire on. You just need about 2 or 4 of them to do it, but you won't ruin your rim using these either, so I recommend these instead. To lube the hell out of this top portion of the tire, kind of on the inside where it's going to be making contact with the rim all the way in, and take any extra stuff and put it on the rim portion. If you Alright, one little trick I've learned through the years too is using tire clamps. Once you get a bite in the tire, use a tire clamp to basically save your spot. So that way you can take your pry bar out and keep going with it. Just keep stretching this dude on, and I'm using more tire clamps as you go. Now, this is an older tire. It's stretched to its limit. I can't seem to get this little part over. So I figured out if I use the bead breaker, a lot of times I can pop that part on without having to overstretch it. So let's see if that works. Let's see if this bead breaker will do what it did last time. It's got a little bit to go. Would you look at that? No more comes through. Alright, we can take all our clamps out now since our tire's on, and we can also take it out of our holder here. Alright, so once you got your tire off of there, go ahead and tighten up your valve nut down here, and then make sure you put back in your valve stem, and we're going to bounce the tire around. We're just going to bounce it around, make sure we get all the tube lined up and out to the sidewalls. Alright, we're going to inflate our tires now. Sometimes you'll hear a pop, sometimes you won't with tube tires, but we're looking to overinflate them and let everything seal real good. Then we'll inflate to proper levels. Now right in here, there's a point that needs to pop still to the rim. So we're going to keep airing this thing up. Let's see if we can get it to do that. You see? Slipped into place. Now inflate your tire to 36 psi. That's what the rear one requires. And come in here and take your old wheel weights out. I usually just use a screwdriver to bend them open. And then we're going to balance our tire. Alright, for this stage of the game, we usually have some cones that go inside of a shaft for your tire. And then you'll place it on a balancer like so. Now what we're going to wait for is the tire to settle from bouncing back and forth, and when it does, it's going to find its lightest point on top. After settling multiple times, I found that it's pretty much even with these two weights on there. Just going to crimp them on in the final resting place on this tire change. Alright, get yourself some grease. I just use bearing grease, wheel bearing grease, but you're going to want to put it on your drive shaft here at the end, because this is where it's going to effectively meet your gears and turn your wheel. And I also take a bunch and put it inside our cylinder here. Just give it a good swiping in the hole there. And I'll also take some and put it on the doohickey here, where it's going to effectively meet our wheel, just so it's all nice and pasted up and it'll stick in there real good. Then we're ready to mount our wheel. But now we're just going to basically take this and reattach it to our wheel. There we go. There's our drive shaft. There's actually a little pin sitting under it that comes off your frame, and then you can see where the hole is that your drive shaft needs to go into. Now for sure the hardest thing to do while you're trying to thread the drive shaft in on the left hand side of the bike is keeping this right hand brake caliper piece of shit on this frame, because you can't come up afterwards and you can't come down afterwards. It has to go on at the same time. So what I do is I use a bungee cord. I just get it lined up with the top half where it's initially going to go. And because I'm by myself, I'm using a hydraulic jack. I'm just lowering the bike a little bit at a time so that I can keep this piece lined up and get my drive shaft back in the hole. I'm just going to probably lift up my legs and kind of elevate, jack the bike up and lower it down back and forth. I even got some wood shims underneath the bike to help with bringing the tire up and down while I maneuver. First thing I'm putting on, seems how we got the axle in, is I'm tightening this axle nut so this thing don't come slipping out. So now I'll put everything back in the opposite order we took it off. Stick that on with our 2 nuts. You got 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts. Go ahead and set those in place. I'm going to use a brake spreader just to separate these brakes real quick, a little bit. It just makes getting them back on the road a whole lot easier. Once everything's pushed in, you can tighten all those nuts up now. Here's our main axle nut now. We want to torque it to 77 foot-pounds. There we are. Top of this brake caliper bolt here has to be 348 inch-pounds or 29 foot-pounds. These other 2 bolts, I don't really worry about torquing them. I just make them snug, more than snug, because they're too hard to get a ratchet in there. Now these 4 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, are 59 foot-pounds each. Now because I did use a brake spreader, I want you to pump your rear brake a few times to get the play out of the brake line. And also, because we did leak final drive fluid, you need to open this up and fill it up until your final drive fluid is level with the opening of that screw hole.